Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be baking a loaf of sourdough bread. This has become one of my favorite things to do, especially this time of year when I can't get outside as much and work in the garden. It's been very gloomy the last few days, and if I'm being quite honest, it's kind of affected my mood a little bit. I figured today I would try and cheer myself up by spending the day using my hands making some bread. I've been getting a lot of questions about people having issues with their dough rising, so we're gonna try and troubleshoot that in this video. All you need to make your sourdough is you're gonna need an active starter. When anyone refers to a starter as being active, this is what you wanna see. You wanna see all of these little bubbles in your starter. Before you bake your loaf of bread, you're going to need to feed your starter a few hours before. Typically, I actually feed mine the night before. When I fed this, it was probably up to here. So you can see it's more than doubled. There is a ton of bubbles, very active. It smells very sour. Just trying to give you guys an idea of what an active starter actually looks like, because I have gotten a lot of questions that, like I said, my dough's not rising. And just because your starter, you've been doing it for a while, it doesn't mean it's necessarily active. And it can go kind of dormant and come back and forth. You want to make sure it looks something like this. You need some sort of bowl to put it in. You're going to need your bread flour or all-purpose flour. And then you're going to need filtered water. We have a Berkey, so I just grab water out of there. I highly recommend getting a kitchen scale. This has really made a difference when making my bread. So I am going to start the first step of making this loaf of bread. This is one thing that's been coming up a lot too. I'm getting a lot of questions about, do I have to make a loaf every single day? No, you can. I typically make 2 to 3 loaves a week. I'll put one in the freezer. And then in the middle of the week, I'll pop it out, let it thaw, and it tastes just as good as the fresh ones. But that way I don't have to make bread every single day and we still have bread on hand. If you don't feel like baking multiple times, or you just want to do a loaf every now and then, once you've added your starter as part of your ingredients, you're going to discard about half. And then you're gonna refeed, and then you can pop this in the refrigerator until you wanna use it again. I can leave my sourdough starter on the counter for about 3 to 4 days without doing anything to it, and I can still revive it and it's fine. If you're gonna not bake for a week or 2 weeks, I would definitely feed it, pop it in the refrigerator, and then when you pull it out, bring it to room temperature before using. I also had someone ask me why they have so much starter. When you discard your starter, you're gonna discard a lot. So I'll show you guys how I do that in this video, because you're only gonna use 100 grams of this starter, which means you're still gonna have quite a bit left. There's so many discard recipes, so I know this seems very wasteful, but you can actually keep your discard for other recipes, or you can gift it to someone, or you can honestly toss it, whatever you wanna do. Today I'm gonna be tossing it because I don't have anything in mind that I really wanna make, but I'll show you exactly what I mean when I say you're still gonna discard and refeed after baking your loaf of bread. If you don't do that, or if you're not discarding enough, you're gonna end up with so much starter, and unless you're baking multiple loaves a day, it's just going to be a lot to feed, and you don't really need that scale. And I have it at 0 grams, and then I put my bowl on, and then it's going to obviously weigh my bowl. So I'm going to tear the scale down so it's at 0. All right, and then I'm going to add 500 grams of flour. And then I'm gonna go ahead and mix this together. So this is what it should look like. I'm gonna put a damp tea towel over this, and I'm gonna let that sit for 30 minutes just to really hydrate this flour. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add my starter. I did forget to mention you will need salt, about 12 grams of salt. So then I'm gonna add my starter and salt and mix everything together. So it has been 30 minutes. You can see My bread is still shaggy. This is perfectly normal. What we did there is we let that flour hydrate with the water that we put in. So now we are going to put in our sourdough starter. It is at 0 grams. I'll go ahead and put my bowl on and then tare it so it says 0 grams. And then we're gonna go ahead and put in 100 grams of our active sourdough starter. And then we're gonna put 12 grams of salt. Go ahead and take my hands. You can see it's pretty sticky. Beginning of this video, I said we were gonna talk about what you do with your starter now that you have incorporated 100 grams into your loaf. So what you're gonna see, this is kind of hard to see here, but I am left, my starter is about here. I still discard most of what's in here. I'm actually gonna dump it in the garbage because I don't have any plans to make anything with the discard. I'm gonna try my best to show you, this is what's in here now, and let me do a discard. And this is what I have left. So I hope that represents it well. I hope you can see it. I should have just weighed it so I could have told you, but literally I have like this much in here. Once all this falls, I'll probably have like up to here. So it's probably half. I'm going to feed it. So I'm gonna put in 100 grams of filtered water, 100 grams of wheat flour, stir that up really nice, and then I'll put my lid on, set it in the corner. You want to have plenty of flour to water to starter ratio. So you really should have like 100 grams starter, 100 grams flour, and 100 grams water. And that is a good ratio to keep your sourdough starter fed and active. If it starts to separate, you have too much water in your starter. It's not bubbly and active. That means you didn't discard enough and you didn't feed it enough. Honestly, you could probably skim down a ton of your starter and feed it so that it becomes super active. I had a lady on Facebook message me that she had a ton of starter and she was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't understand. And then we started talking and she explained what she was doing for her discard and she wasn't discarding enough. So over the week or 2 weeks of her building her starter, she ended up with so much starter. And I was like, honestly, that's impressive to have that much active starter, but you don't need that. And you're just gonna have to feed it a lot more, if that makes sense. And your recipes are only gonna call for like 100 grams. So there's no reason why you would need 2,000 plus grams of starter. This is the flour that I use. It's white whole wheat flour and it works really well. I haven't had any problems with it. I have seen a lot of people use all-purpose unbleached flour. I've seen a lot of people use bread flour for starters. This is the only one that I've used. It's worked great. And again, I have a Berkey, so I am using that filtered water, but it has to be filtered water. All I'm doing here is I have a spoon and I turn it upside down and I am just mixing my starter. It's gonna look like this, like pretty clumpy. Just keep mixing. It should be pretty hard to mix. I go to the bottom and I kind of scoop up to make sure I'm getting all of that original starter mixed in with the flour and water I just put in. It gets pretty gross if I'm being honest. So I take my spoon and I go around the edge to get all of that off and get it incorporated back into the starter. I don't know if I go through and I scrape down my sides and then I just put this on top. You can see now I have this much starter. So I will just let this sit, show you what this looks like tomorrow. So we still have a few more minutes before we do our first set of stretch and folds. I have some laundry I'm gonna throw in, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then, yeah, we'll do the stretch and folds. All right, it has been a little while. It's actually been like 40 minutes because baby woke up. Here is my loaf. So we're gonna do our first set of stretch and folds. And what that means is you are literally stretching the dough and folding it over. Pick up the dough from one side, just like this, and fold it over. And I'm gonna keep doing that. You're gonna have, your dough's gonna look something like that. Great, so I am just placing this right on top again. I'm gonna go ahead and let it sit for another half hour. We'll come back and we will do another set of stretch and folds. Go ahead and pull up one side, fold it over. All right, so I did my last set of stretch and folds. You can see my dough looks a lot better. It's stiffened up quite a bit. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna cover it with a damp cloth, and I'm gonna let it sit on the counter for anywhere from 5 to 8 hours. So later on this evening, I'm gonna end up putting it in my refrigerator. You'll see all of that in this video. One thing that you might be having issues with is your bread not really rising, and that could be due to the temperature in your house. Our house is actually pretty cold right now. We live in Pennsylvania, so it's already like 40 degrees outside, and we don't really run our heat super hot. What I do to help if I'm having issues is I'll turn the light on in my oven and I'll pop this in there, not with the oven on, just the light on, and then it keeps it warm enough where I can definitely tell a difference in my bread. So that might be something, or if you have a heat mat for maybe like seedlings, you can plug that in and then set your bread right on top of that. And pick you guys back up later this evening and we'll finish it off. All right, it is about 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'm just flouring my countertop and I'm gonna pull the dough out of the bowl. What I do is I start at the top, I'm gonna call it, of the bowl, and I gently pull it out. And then I just roll it on top of itself, kind of creating a burrito. And then I start to shape my dough by tucking it underneath. Then I'm just gonna flour a towel that I have in a bowl. When you tap your dough, you should see it move a little bit. And I am going to put it finished side down into the bowl, and then I like to put plastic bags on it just to keep the moisture in. And I'm gonna pop that into my refrigerator overnight, and I'll pick you back up in the morning. Well, good morning. I have my hot cup of coffee. It is like 7 in the morning. I'm gonna go ahead and start baking the loaf of bread that we let sit in the refrigerator all night. I have my oven preheating at 450. I also have my Dutch oven inside while it's preheating. And I'm just gonna take my dough out of my refrigerator, and then we're going to score it on a floured piece of parchment paper, and then we can start baking. So I pulled my dough out of the refrigerator, and then I'm just going to put it on a piece of floured parchment paper. I don't have a banneton. I actually just ordered one. So I do have to form my dough a little bit once I put it down on the parchment paper. And then I'm just going to flour the dough, and I'm going to go ahead and score it. I'm just going to do a big cut along the side and then a few little ones on the other side. I don't know how to do anything fancy quite yet. Waiting for my oven to preheat. I did tell you that I was going to show you what my starter looked like after I added 100 grams to my dough, and then I refed it. So this is the next day, and you can see it's already active. Yeah, it looks really good. So this is what your starter should look like. You should have plenty of starter. You can see here these. So we're just waiting for the oven to preheat, and we'll slide this in. We're gonna cook it for 36 minutes. I don't know why, but one more minute, just something about it. I like it. So I do 36 minutes with the lid on, and then I do like 15-20 minutes with the lid off. I do have a ceramic Dutch oven. If you have a Dutch oven, you can use it. You don't have to. I just feel like it gives the bread a little bit more spring, crisps it up really nice. So the oven's ready. I'm gonna go ahead and take my Dutch oven out, and I'm gonna put the bread in right on the parchment paper. I'll bake that for 36 minutes, take the lid off, bake it for another 15. Once it's done, I'll pull it out of the oven, and then I am going to put it on a cooling rack, and I'm gonna let that sit for about 30 minutes before I cut it. All right, and that is how to make a beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. I've not mastered the art of making all of those beautiful designs. I am just able to make an edible loaf of bread that my family loves. A couple things that I want to talk about when it comes to sourdough and to know if your bread is done. I at first was really liking it to be like crispy, and I would cook it way longer with the lid off, so it would probably be like 25 minutes with the lid off. After it sat for like a day, it just got really hard even to cut. I didn't love it as much. When it was fresh, it was great. I mean, we don't eat a whole loaf of bread right out of the oven. I do mine a little lighter. It seems to cut a lot better, and it's a lot easier after a day. If you want to know if your bread is done, you can tap the bottom, and if it's hollow, that means it's done. When I first started, like right here in my bread would be really dense. That was because I wasn't letting my dough rise long enough. So that fermentation period, I was cutting it short just because I was excited. I was also only cooking it for like 30 minutes with the lid on. Once I started cooking it for 36 minutes with the lid on, that seemed to help that. So if you're having that issue, that might be part of it. Try those things. If you pull your bread out of the oven and it is completely flat, there's a few things. One, you probably have way too much water or moisture in your dough. That is not going to allow that fermentation to really happen. You're going to end up with dough that doesn't rise. Or your starter isn't as active as you think it is, and then it's not really creating what it needs to in the dough to help it rise. So those are just a few things. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer anything I can. If you want to see more videos like this, also leave that in the comments. I love making sourdough, especially this time of year and into the holidays. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, friends.